Breaking news at 7 o'clock, and Prince Andrew has announced that he is relinquishing his royal titles.
We are tracking breaking news coming from the UK. Prince Andrew is set to give up all of his titles, including that of Duke of York.
Breaking news from Buckingham Palace, and this time, it's not a rumour. Prince Andrew has officially relinquished all his royal titles and honours, ending months of speculation and years of controversy. The announcement came at 9 a.m. sharp, a short, carefully worded statement read by the Prince himself, broadcast live across the UK. "I have decided, as I always have, to put my duty to my family and country first," he said, his voice steady, but his eyes heavy. He thanked the King, spoke of service, denied wrongdoing, and then walked off camera. 3 minutes, 20 seconds. That was all it took to end a royal career spanning 4 decades. Palace officials framed it as voluntary. Insiders say it was anything but. This wasn't a decision, it was an execution, one senior royal source told the Mail on Sunday. He was told to step down, or Parliament would do it for him. And the official statement described discussions with His Majesty and the wider family. What it didn't mention was the meeting earlier this week at Clarence House, where, according to insiders, the King, Prince William, Princess Catherine, and the Queen Consort finally agreed that Andrew had to go. "The monarchy couldn't carry this any longer," said a courtier. This was the last unavoidable move. Outside Buckingham Palace, cameras flashed as the flag remained at full mast, a reminder that the crown carries on even when one of its own falls. But across London, a single quote trended on social media. "It's a shame Virginia Giuffre isn't here to see the day Andrew gives up his royal titles." That line, painful, cutting, framed the day's headlines. The scandal that began with Jeffrey Epstein had claimed its final royal victim. Yet the timing of this announcement raised more questions than it answered. Why now? Why this week? Sources within Westminster say private concerns were growing about Andrew's business ties with foreign investors, including at least one Chinese intermediary linked to the Beijing spy scandal that rocked Parliament earlier this year. "There's no evidence of wrongdoing," a former security official told us, "but there was definitely unease. The palace doesn't like risk, and this was risk." 1. To some observers, the move felt less like accountability and more like quarantine, a way to seal off a spreading infection before it reached the institution's heart. "This is containment," said a GB News commentator. "They didn't remove him for justice, they removed him for survival." Public reaction was as divided as ever. Outside Windsor, some described the moment as sad but necessary. Others called it a humiliation orchestrated by the King's inner circle. Yet a few noticed what was missing. No family members appeared with Andrew, not even a word of support from his daughters. "That silence was the loudest message of all," a veteran royal reporter said. And while today's headlines focused on Andrew, tonight's conversations were already shifting elsewhere, toward California. If accountability now applies to blood princes, what does that mean for those who left the palace on their own terms? Within hours, online forums were flooded with one question. If the Duke of York can lose his title, could the Duke and Duchess of Sussex be next? The palace declined to comment, but royal watchers were quick to connect the dots. A monarchy tightening its grip, redefining what loyalty means in an era when scandal travels faster than silence. For now, the fact stands. Prince Andrew is no longer Duke of York, no longer colonel of any regiment, no longer entitled to the honours once pinned to his chest. His public income has been cut, his royal role erased, and his presence at official events quietly ruled out. Only one title remains untouched, Prince, by birthright alone. Tonight, Buckingham Palace insists the matter is closed. But the tone across the network suggests otherwise. "This feels like the end of something," one royal correspondent said live on air, but perhaps also the beginning of something else. A new, colder Windsor, where even blood is no longer protection. As London settles under the autumn sky, one thing is clear. A prince has fallen, and the monarchy, once untouchable, has drawn its first line in the sand. Behind the polished wording of Buckingham Palace's announcement, a far more complex story is unfolding. According to insiders, the decision for Prince Andrew to give up his royal titles was not the product of one man's conscience, but the outcome of a tense closed-door summit at Clarence House that stretched late into the night. Multiple sources have confirmed that the King, Prince William, Princess Catherine, and Princess Anne were present. The Queen Consort joined later, though her role remains deliberately vague. The tone of that meeting, one aide said, was clinical, no emotion, no nostalgia, just damage control. The trigger, according to people familiar with the discussions, was a briefing from royal legal advisers. The report warned that Andrew's continued use of his titles could expose the monarchy to political pressure and possibly parliamentary intervention. The palace's lawyers made it clear, if the king didn't act, Parliament might. That warning carried weight. The last time Britain had used the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 was during wartime, to strip German princes of their English peerages. Invoking it again, in peacetime, against a member of the Queen's own son, would have been unthinkable. But the fact that it was even mentioned, that was enough, a senior palace source told The Times. There was no appetite for another public showdown. The king wanted this handled quietly, and William wanted it done fast. William's stance, according to those present, was clear. He believes the monarchy cannot move forward if it keeps dragging the past behind it, said one royal insider. To him, this isn't cruelty, it's maintenance. Catherine, who was seen entering Clarence House with a stack of briefing papers, spoke little during the meeting, but several attendees later recalled her single comment at the end, "Sometimes duty means letting go of what feels familiar." Those words reportedly lingered with the king long after the meeting ended. Camilla, in contrast, remained mostly silent, an unusual move for a woman often described as the family's strategist. Her silence, one courtier said, was approval by omission. By midnight, the decision was made. Andrew would announce his resignation from royal life, framed as a personal choice made with His Majesty's agreement. The palace communications team drafted the statement before dawn. At sunrise, Andrew was informed. He was furious, said a person close to him. He said he'd already stepped back 5 years ago. He didn't understand why this was happening now. Officially, Buckingham Palace says the move was to prevent distraction from the work of the king and the royal family. But privately, the language was sharper. One aide put it bluntly, the brand couldn't carry him anymore. The calculus was both moral and political. The monarchy has been under growing scrutiny since the death of Queen Elizabeth II. With King Charles's health challenges, the public spotlight has shifted toward William and Catherine, the image of continuity and restraint. They can't modernize the firm while Andrew's scandals still hang in the air, said a communications consultant who works with several royal charities. And while the Epstein saga remains the most public stain, senior advisors are said to be uneasy about Andrew's past financial connections, some involving international investors and at least one Chinese intermediary. There is no evidence of wrongdoing, but insiders describe the optics as impossible. The palace doesn't deal in guilt or innocence, said one veteran commentator. It deals in perception. Once you lose control of the story, you lose control of the crown. And in that light, the Clarence House meeting wasn't about punishment, it was about containment. To save the image of the monarchy, someone had to fall. Yet even as the king signed off on the final statement, there was a palpable sense of sorrow. "He's still my brother," Charles reportedly told an aide. "But I am the king, and the crown must come first." Outside the palace, speculation continues about how deep this internal reordering might go. Some observers note that what happened to Andrew could set a precedent for how the institution handles future dissent or scandal, even among other senior royals. In an editorial published hours after the broadcast, The Telegraph wrote, "This is not merely the story of a disgraced prince. It is the story of a monarchy learning to amputate its infected limbs to keep the body alive. For the public, it's a spectacle of accountability. For the royals, it's survival. And behind that survival, a new hierarchy is quietly taking shape, one where image outweighs tradition, where silence carries more power than blood." As one palace observer said late last night, Andrew's fall wasn't a reckoning, it was a rehearsal. The House of Windsor has just learned how far it's willing to go to protect itself. The cameras have left Clarence House. The statements are signed. But for those watching closely, this isn't closure. It's the start of a new, colder chapter in the royal playbook. Money, that's where every royal scandal eventually lands. Behind the graceful language of duty and family, the financial machinery of the monarchy had already turned against Prince Andrew long before today's announcement. Royal sources confirm his private funding, once estimated at nearly £1 million per year, was quietly reduced over the past 3 years and, according to multiple reports, completely frozen this autumn. A senior palace accountant put it delicately. There's no official line about money, but there's no money. For a man who had lived for decades with every expense discreetly covered by the sovereign grant or royal stipends, that change was seismic. He's not broke in the ordinary sense, one financial insider explained, but the royal safety net is gone. Every staff salary, every car, every private jet, he now has to think twice. At Royal Lodge, his home on the Windsor estate, the effect was immediate. Neighbours told The Telegraph that in the past week, removal vans have been seen at the property. Staff have been reassigned. And Sarah Ferguson, his ex-wife and longtime housemate, has reportedly begun selling off antiques and artworks. "She's liquidating," said a friend. There's pressure. Financial, political, emotional, all at once. That pressure may explain why the palace moved swiftly to formalise Andrew's exile. According to royal correspondence, advisors had grown uneasy not just about Epstein, but about Andrew's private dealings with international investors, including one intermediary linked to Chinese state enterprises. The contact, first reported in 2023's Beijing spy scandal, resurfaced in internal briefings this month. No allegations of illegality have been made. Still, the optics were poisonous. "He didn't have to do anything wrong," said one intelligence analyst. "All he had to do was meet the wrong people at the wrong time, and the headlines would write themselves." Within the palace, that scenario alone was enough to trigger alarm. One former MI5 officer told Sky, "It's not espionage, it's exposure." A senior royal with financial vulnerability is a security risk, even if he doesn't realise it. To make matters worse, the public had begun to notice the lifestyle gap. Andrew, technically a non-working royal since 2019, continued to live in a 30-room mansion with state-funded security, while the king's official budget faced annual cuts. The contrast was untenable. "People were furious," said a political columnist. "It looked like privilege without purpose." By early October, senior courtiers knew the situation could not continue. The king's advisors recommended what one called a financial reset. In plain terms, isolate Andrew, end subsidies, and frame it as voluntary duty. The palace communications team was instructed to emphasize phrases like family unity and personal choice. Behind the scenes, the tone was harsher. "Cutting the money was cutting the cord," said a long-time royal staffer. "Without funds, there's no platform, no influence, no way back." In the week leading up to his televised statement, Andrew was seen driving alone near Windsor, looking visibly tense. One palace insider recalled, "He wasn't angry, he was scared. He understood that losing the title meant losing protection. That protection, the layers of protocol and privilege surrounding a royal name, has always been his invisible shield. With it gone, the consequences are unpredictable. Once he's just Prince Andrew, private citizen, the Crown can't buffer him from legal exposure or debt, a constitutional lawyer explained. He's on his own. Still, not everyone inside the palace agrees with how the situation was handled. A small but vocal minority believe Andrew's complete isolation is cruel and risks destabilizing the family further. The king is pruning too hard, one source told The Times. It may come back to haunt him if another scandal hits. Outside Windsor, public sympathy remains scarce. For many Britons, this was overdue accountability, but the speed and silence surrounding the process have raised eyebrows. Why the sudden urgency now, after years of half measures? Some observers point to a quiet warning from Whitehall, suggesting renewed media interest in Andrew's past financial dealings abroad. Others suspect a calculated distraction. The monarchy needed to show reform, one political analyst said. Andrew's fall was the easiest way to prove it. Whatever the motive, the result is the same. The man once styled His Royal Highness, Duke of York, now stands alone, stripped of office, income, and influence. His only remaining asset is the Royal Lodge itself, held on a private lease until 2078. But even that, sources suggest, may not last forever. If he can't afford the upkeep, an estate contact told the Mail, the Crown Estate has options. And so, the financial story of Andrew's downfall becomes a mirror to the monarchy itself, the wealthiest family in Britain learning how to publicly sever one of its own. As one commentator concluded on air tonight, this was not about money, it was about control. And control, in this palace, is the only currency that ever really matters. Tomorrow's headlines will call it closure. But inside Windsor, the accounts may still be open, and the questions far from settled. One day before Prince Andrew's televised statement, something remarkable happened. Not inside the palace, but on a stage in central London. Princess Catherine, poised and understated, stepped up to a podium at a mental health summit and delivered a message that seemed to cut through every headline. "Honour," she said quietly, "is not something we inherit. It's something we prove every day, through our choices." No names were mentioned, no scandals cited. Yet across social media, across newsrooms, across Buckingham itself, everyone knew exactly what she was referring to. The timing was too precise, the phrasing too sharp. 24 hours later, Andrew's titles were gone, and suddenly, Catherine's speech wasn't just a public appearance, it was prophecy. Royal correspondents called it a masterstroke in quiet power. BBC anchors replayed the clip on loop, describing it as the speech that redefined modern duty. One commentator observed, "It was elegant, it was strategic, and it completely reset the conversation, from scandal to strength." Behind the scenes, insiders confirmed that the Princess of Wales had been fully briefed on the upcoming announcement. "She didn't speak as a wife or a mother," one aide said. "She spoke as the moral voice of the next generation." The distinction matters. In a family still bruised from accusations of silence and complicity, Catherine's message provided what the institution desperately needed: a conscience. "She's the empathy the monarchy was missing," a senior journalist wrote in The Times. Even those outside the royal circle took notice. Meghan Markle, speaking from California on her Archetypes podcast, commented dryly, "It's fascinating how some people find their voice only when it's convenient." Her remark reignited the old feud between the sisters-in-law, but this time, the dynamic had shifted. Catherine didn't respond, and she didn't have to. By saying less, she said more. Public polling released that evening showed her approval rating surge to its highest since the Queen's funeral. "She represents stability," said a former palace aide. In the same week, the monarchy amputated one of its limbs. Catherine reminded Britain that the body still has a heartbeat. And Camilla, by contrast, was conspicuously absent from view. She attended no public events, made no statements. "It's deliberate," one royal watcher explained. She's allowing the younger generation to front the reform. It looks modern, but make no mistake, it's choreographed. That choreography, a carefully managed balance of removal and renewal, has become the palace's survival strategy. While Andrew's downfall served as proof of accountability, Catherine's image became the reassurance that the crown itself remained untainted. "The monarchy can survive scandal," said one BBC analyst. "What it can't survive is cynicism. Catherine's role is to make people believe again." Inside Kensington Palace, staff describe her approach as emotional diplomacy, the art of saying everything without confrontation. She visits charities, attends schools, listens to people. The camera loves her, but more importantly, the public trusts her. That trust is now currency in the Windsor system. Every crisis needs its counterweight, and Catherine has become precisely that. "She's the anti-Andrew," a political columnist said bluntly. His fall gives her rise meaning. Still, the shift hasn't gone unnoticed abroad. American outlets are drawing comparisons between Catherine's controlled elegance and Meghan's outspoken independence. Two models of royalty, one CNN segment concluded. One preserved, one rejected. The monarchy chose the former. Within the palace, the king reportedly praised his daughter-in-law's timing, calling her words perfectly judged. For those watching the power dynamics within the family, it was a telling moment. Charles may rule by title, but Catherine now rules by narrative. A senior aide summarized it best. "For years, people said the monarchy needed to modernize. They were wrong. It needed Catherine. And as the dust from Andrew's fall settles, her silence has become the monarchy's shield. While one brother fades into scandal, the princess's image stands as the counterbalance, compassion over chaos, integrity over indulgence. Even her absence from the more sensational interviews speaks volumes. She's not here to defend the crown with words, another insider said. She's here to make the crown worth defending. But beneath the polished surface, a new question is emerging, one that no amount of grace can deflect. How long can the institution rely on one woman's credibility to cover the sins of an entire dynasty? As the palace resets its image, observers warn that this balance between punishment and redemption is fragile. "For now," said a royal historian, "the monarchy has found its light in Catherine, but light casts shadows, and in those shadows, other storms are already gathering. And tomorrow, headlines will move on. Catherine's photograph will grace the front pages, Andrew's name will slip into smaller type, and the palace will breathe again, at least for now. Because if history has taught anything, it's that the Windsors never truly escape scandal. They only postpone it until the next thunderclap. And as Britain moves on from the spectacle of his televised resignation, new questions are surfacing about what happens now, to him, to the monarchy, and to those still carrying royal titles across the Atlantic. In Windsor, Andrew remains behind the gates of Royal Lodge, his 30-room estate that has become both home and prison. Security staff have been reduced, public appearances forbidden. He has been seen only once since the broadcast, driving alone near the Long Walk, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. A neighbour described it simply, "He looked like a man rehearsing an apology he'll never get to say." Inside the palace, there's quiet relief that the crisis is, at least officially, contained. But privately, courtiers admit unease. "He's isolated," one said. "A man with nothing left to lose, and too many stories left untold." I'm on you. Those stories are what worry the institution most. Multiple insiders have confirmed that Andrew has begun documenting his own version of events, a private journal he's been keeping since 2019. According to one aide who worked with him then, he writes everything down, meetings, calls, the people who turned their backs. There are even whispers of a potential memoir in the works, tentatively titled The Truth of a Prince. Publishing insiders dismiss it as unlikely, but the rumour alone has unsettled Buckingham. "He may not speak now," said one observer, "but silence doesn't mean obedience. It means waiting. Beyond Windsor, the consequences of his exile ripple outward. Across the Atlantic, attention has turned to Harry and Meghan, the self-exiled Duke and Duchess of Sussex. In the hours after Andrew's announcement, hashtags like #NextInLine and #StripTheSussexes trended across social media. Technically, Harry and Meghan remain royal dukes, their titles conferred by the late Queen in 2018. Legally, only Parliament can revoke them under the Titles Deprivation Act, the same law mentioned in whispers around Andrew's case. It hasn't been used in over a century, but the conversation has begun. A Conservative MP told The Telegraph this week, "If Andrew can lose his title over disgrace, then surely we should review titles held by those who've abandoned their duties altogether." The comment was immediately criticised as political grandstanding, yet the message resonated with a growing faction of traditionalists inside Westminster. Royal watchers, however, are divided. "Andrew was cut for cause," said one commentator. "Harry and Meghan walked out by choice. One broke trust, the other broke ties. The monarchy may tolerate betrayal, but it won't reward indifference." Still, the parallel is impossible to ignore. Both men, brothers of future kings, now stand outside the institution, symbols of how the House of Windsor handles dissent. One was erased, the other erased himself, and between them lies the quiet figure of Catherine, the woman now seen as the moral compass of the monarchy. "The Windsors have always survived by contrast," said a royal historian. "For every scandal, there's a saviour. For every fall, a rise. Catherine's rise makes Andrew's fall digestible. I know, boo." Meanwhile, Andrew's daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, find themselves in a delicate position. Though their titles remain intact, both women have stepped back from public life, avoiding interviews and events. They're loyal to their father, but realistic, one family friend told the Mail. They know the monarchy has made its choice, and it wasn't him. Back in California, the Sussexes have remained publicly silent, but sources close to the couple told American media that Meghan found the palace's decision predictable and performative. The Duke, meanwhile, is said to be saddened by his uncle's situation, but not surprised. Inside Buckingham Palace, those remarks didn't go unnoticed. A senior aide sighed. Every time they comment, they remind Britain that they're still part of the story, and that's exactly what the king wants to end. I did. For now, Charles's focus is consolidation, a smaller, cleaner monarchy centered on William, Catherine, and their children. The message is clear. The future lies with them. "The firm has learned from its mistakes," said a palace insider. "This is the age of accountability, even for royals." But even that narrative has its limits. The public may applaud the king's decisiveness today, but they will inevitably ask tomorrow where that line of accountability ends. "It's not just about Andrew," a political analyst warned. "Once you show you can remove a title, the question becomes, who's next?" Tonight, the monarchy is quieter, leaner, more cautious. Yet beneath the calm, there's an unmistakable tension, the feeling that this purge, however necessary, may not be over. One veteran journalist put it best. "The Windsors are building a wall to protect themselves. But walls don't only keep danger out, they trap the ghosts inside." As lights go out at Windsor and the cameras turn away, Britain is left with the image of a fallen prince in exile, a king balancing mercy with survival, and a princess quietly redefining what honor means. The official line is that this is closure. But in the history of the crown, closure is never the end. It's just the calm before the next reckoning. The palace calls it closure, but the air around Windsor tonight says otherwise. Behind those stone walls, the monarchy is quieter than it has been in years. No briefings, no leaks, no invitations. The crisis has been contained. Yes, but not forgotten. A name erased from royal stationery doesn't disappear from history. It lingers, like a watermark that refuses to fade. In the official narrative, the matter is settled. Prince Andrew has given up his titles, retreated from public life, and accepted the king's wisdom. Yet across the corridors of power, no one truly believes the story ends here. There are too many threads still hanging. The unanswered questions about his finances, the quiet investigations into his foreign contacts, the whispered rumors of a memoir locked away in a Windsor desk drawer. Royal correspondents say the palace has entered what they call the post-crisis silence period, a deliberate vacuum meant to suffocate speculation. But speculation doesn't suffocate, it multiplies. Tonight, commentators on every network are asking the same thing. What does this moment mean for the monarchy? For some, it's renewal, proof that even the most privileged are not untouchable. For others, it's a warning that blood no longer guarantees protection, and that the Windsors, once a family, now operate like a board of directors, trimming loss. A senior political journalist on Sky put it bluntly, "Andrew is gone, but he's not the story. The story is what comes next. Who decides who stays royal? And why?" Already, murmurs from Westminster hint that Parliament might examine how royal titles are governed, particularly for those living abroad or outside official duties. The discussion is theoretical, for now, but the symbolism is impossible to miss. The Sussex question, as it's being called, hovers over every broadcast. Could it happen? Could the monarchy, emboldened by this week's purge, move to redefine its relationship with Harry and Meghan? The palace refuses to answer, but the press has already begun the trial. Tabloids run split-screen headlines. One prince silenced, another still speaks. And through it all, the public's faith rests precariously on Catherine. In her restraint, Britain sees stability. In her composure, hope. She has become the still point of a family spinning on its axis. Every photo of her, a school visit, a hospital corridor, a quiet smile beside the king, is now part of a campaign that doesn't need slogans. She is the proof, wrote the Times, that the crown still knows how to endure. But endurance has a cost. Even the most polished silence hides exhaustion. Those close to Catherine say she is tired but resolute. She knows what she represents, the bridge between the monarchy that was and the one it must become. And as for Andrew, there will be no public redemption. No televised apology, no final interview, only time, and the faint echo of a name that once carried weight. "He's not dangerous anymore," one palace aide said quietly. "Just unfinished." That word, unfinished, may define this entire era of the House of Windsor. Each scandal patched, each name erased, but the cracks always visible beneath the paint. The king, recovering and reflective, is said to spend more time at Highgrove now. He rarely speaks of his brother, but according to one courtier, he once said, almost to himself, "My mother built the monarchy on duty. I will have to rebuild it on consequence." Perhaps that is the real legacy of this week. Not the fall of a prince, but the rise of a new principle that titles, like trust, can be lost. And so, as Britain closes another royal chapter, the final image is not of disgrace but of transition. A kingdom still standing, a family still fractured, a silence that feels like peace but hums with the promise of another storm. Because in the House of Windsor, endings are never really endings. They are pauses between crises, breaths between thunderclaps. And somewhere, in the stillness of Royal Lodge, a man once called His Royal Highness turns another page in his journal, writes a single line, and underlines it twice. The crown survives, but so do I.